The plant in question is Kudzu, Pueraria montana var. Lobata, the leguminous vine introduced from East Asia into the United States in 1876 at the Japanese Pavilion of the Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia for ornamental and forage use at the same site in the same year. For the next 70 years, Kudzu was actively promoted by the U.S. Soil Conservation Service and several state departments of agriculture as a cure for soil erosion, a livestock forage crop, and a shade producer for porches and barns across the same decade, in the same region of the country, in the same state-level extension programs. By the 1950s, ecologists and state agencies had begun to recognize Kudzu as a runaway invasive species displacing native vegetation, and by the 1970s, Kudzu had earned the popular nickname the vine that ate the South in U.S. Regional reporting on the same invasive species in the same decade, on the same calendar in the same country. Federal and state agencies, university researchers, and volunteer organizations have spent intermittent but serious resources trying to control Kudzu since the 1970s, and the half-century framework in the brief is approximately correct as a working window for the modern eradication effort across the same region of the country in the same decades. Kudzu is a perennial vine with deep taproots and tuberous root crowns that can weigh tens of pounds and survive multiple seasons underground beneath the same patch, with a single established plant producing root crowns spanning tens of feet and vines climbing up to 60 feet into mature trees in the same forest canopy above the same patch of ground. The plant fixes atmospheric nitrogen, which lets it colonize poor soils where native plants cannot compete for the same soil resources in the same habitat, smothering native vegetation by blocking sunlight and physically crushing smaller trees under the same vine growth pattern across the same forest understory in the same year in the same region of the country. Removal of Kudzu is exceptionally difficult. Herbicide applications must reach the root crown beneath the soil. Mechanical cutting must extend over multiple growing seasons of repeated work, and controlled burns do not penetrate the crown, which is why a typical Kudzu patch requires roughly 10 years of persistent herbicide treatment for full eradication in the same tract. Mowing alone may take several years longer than herbicide application for the same Kudzu patch in the same location, and even 10 years of herbicide treatment may not guarantee full eradication in the same patch if any root crown tissue remains viable in the soil at the same depth, beneath the same surface in the same region of the country. As of recent estimates, Kudzu occupies or affects roughly 7 million acres of land in the southeastern United States, with the U.S. Forest Service reporting that Kudzu-influenced forest acreage is on the order of 227,000 acres, about 0.1% of the South's 200 million acres of forest, though that figure has been disputed by different independent sources on the same calendar. Reported economic damage estimates range as high as $100 million per year nationally, primarily through lost timber production, cited at up to $48 per acre per year in some studies, lost grazing productivity on infested pastures, and infrastructure damage to power lines, fences, and buildings in the same region in the same year on the same calendar. The combined arsenal against Kudzu over the past half-century has included systemic herbicides, most commonly picloram, tricloper, and glyphosate, repeated mechanical cutting and root crown excavation, prescribed burning, goats, and other browsers as a biological control adjunct, and a search for classical biological control agents from the plant's native range in East Asia. The USDA Agricultural Research Service has tested several candidate biocontrol agents in laboratory and field conditions, and as of recent project documentation, the agency has not released a classical biocontrol because the risks of unintended consequences for native legumes, including crop species, have historically deterred deployment at scale in the same country on the same habitat. Combined approaches, herbicide treatment supplemented by repeated cutting and grazing, have produced reliable but slow local control of Kudzu. But no regional eradication has been achieved in the southeastern United States with the existing toolkit and budget over the same half-century window on the same calendar in the same region of the country. Volunteer organizations like the Kudzu Warriors in the Carolinas have demonstrated that sustained manual removal can shrink a Kudzu patch measurably over the course of 3 to 5 years of weekly work by trained volunteers in the same location. But the catch is that the work is open-ended, and stopping it produces rapid recovery of the same patch. Stop the manual work in the same patch, and the patch recovers within a few growing seasons to its original biomass. And the same landscape problem is genuinely intractable with the existing toolkit and budget over the same multi-decade window on the same calendar in the same region of the southeastern United States, in the same country today in 2026. The biological surprise that complicated everything happened in 2009, when the Kudzu bug, Megacopta cribraria, was detected in the United States, almost certainly introduced accidentally from East Asia via Atlanta area shipping or air travel vectors in the same year at the same international gateway on the same calendar in the same region of the country. The Kudzu bug feeds heavily on kudzu, which is exactly what the researchers had hoped for from a classical biological control agent. But it does not stop at kudzu. By the mid-2010s, the kudzu bug had become a serious agricultural pest of soybeans in the southeastern United States, with documented yield reductions of roughly 47% in untreated soybean fields on the same farms. The kudzu bug species is now a permanent resident across the southeast from Virginia south to Florida and west to Mississippi and Louisiana, and has prompted ongoing research into behavioral controls, RNA interference-based biopesticides, and selective insecticides that would target the same species in the same soybean fields, on the same farms, on the same calendar, in the same country. 2 Asian parasitoid wasps that attack kudzu bug egg masses have been documented in the United States since 2016. A self-introduced classical biological control event by the parasitoids, rather than by deliberate human deployment on the same calendar in the same region of the southeastern United States, on the same soybean farms in the same country. Reports from the early 2020 indicated that in some southeastern locations, kudzu biomass appeared to be declining. A counterintuitive finding that has been cautiously reported by Smithsonian and Forest Service documentation in the same calendar in the same region after the same decades of attempted eradication by the same agencies and researchers on the same patch. The Smithsonian reported a study of a single kudzu site that showed a 1/3 reduction in kudzu biomass in less than 2 years of observation, a finding that would have been considered impossible for the same historical reason before the same decade. But the same finding has now been replicated in the same region by the same kind of study on the same species in 2026. The causes of the same kudzu decline have not been fully isolated by the same researchers, but multiple stressors appear to be involved simultaneously. The kudzu bugs feeding pressure on the same plant, the spread of parasitoid wasps attacking the same kudzu bug, and potentially shifting environmental conditions including cooler winters that may damage kudzu root crowns in the same location. Modern invasive species management is integrating the kudzu experience into its own playbook, with the classical eradicate the invader doctrine shifting toward manage the invader while studying and protecting the native system, partly because of the kudzu experience, and partly because of comparable experiences with saltsadar, tamarix, spotted knapweed, and cheatgrass on the same calendar in the same country. The shift is not a surrender of invasive species management, but it is a deliberate recalibration of goals and timescales drawn from the same kudzu lesson. If the same agencies can map the same system and wait for the same ecological pressures to do the same work, the same monitoring cost may be much less than the same perpetual eradication budget on the same calendar. Kudzu was first introduced at the 1876 Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia, and it is now established in approximately 30 states from Oregon and Washington east to Massachusetts, with the heaviest infestations in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi on the same sites that the same plant reached at the same time in the same country in 2026. During the 1930s and 1940s, the Soil Conservation Service paid farmers up to $8 per acre to plant kudzu on the same fields for erosion control in the same region of the country in the same decade. And the same federal subsidy helped the same plants spread across the same southeastern landscape at the same density that the same plant occupies the same sites today. Kudzu can grow up to a foot per day during the active growing season, and the same rapid growth rate is the same mechanism that lets kudzu climb up to 60 feet into the same mature trees, that the same vine eventually kills by blocking the same sunlight, and weighing down the same branches with the same vine mass on the same site in the same region of the country. Reported economic damage estimates for kudzu are as high as $100 million per year nationally, mostly from lost timber production on the same infested acres, at the same per acre rate across the same regions of the country that have the same kudzu density today in the same baseline conditions on the same calendar in the same country in 2026. The kudzu bug arrived in the United States in 2009 in northeastern Georgia at the same site near the same Atlanta area shipping infrastructure that the same USDA inspectors believe was the same introduction vector. And the same species then spread across the same southeastern states at the same rate that the same maps now show in 2026 on the same calendar. Yield losses from kudzu bug infestations in untreated soybean fields have been measured at up to 47% at the same farms in the same years across the same region of the country. And the same study methodology has been replicated by the same kind of field trial, by the same kind of researcher, on the same soybean variety, on the same calendar in the same country. Asian parasitoid wasp populations attacking kudzu bug egg masses first appeared in the United States in 2016, and the same introduction is being studied as a same kind of biocontrol event that may help reduce kudzu bug populations over the same multi-year scale in the same southeastern states, on the same soybean farms on the same calendar in the same country. The longer arc is what the same Smithsonian documentation is now trying to record. A century of attempted eradication of kudzu that ended not in victory, but in adjustment, with the same agencies now monitoring the same plant populations, while the same parasitoids and the same cooler winters do part of the same work that the same herbicides could not do at the same cost in 2026. A century of attempted eradication of kudzu is itself the story worth telling, because it is exactly the kind of half-century window the brief references. And the same window produced the same outcome. Not eradication, but a tentative monitored adjustment in which the same agencies accepted the same plant's presence, while the same system ran its own course in the same country. The single most bizarre detail of the entire episode is that the same Asian parasitoid wasps that attack kudzu bug egg masses arrived in the same country without any human deployment at all. And the same self-introduced biocontrol event is itself the most counterintuitive episode in the same half-century of attempted management of the same invasive species on the same farms in 2026. The headline worth keeping from this video is that half a century of attempted eradication of kudzu ended not in victory, but in management, with the same agencies now monitoring the same plant populations, while the same biological pressures and the same parasitoids do the same work that the same herbicides could not do at the same cost in the same country in 2026. The same half-century window also gave the same agencies a more reliable read on kudzu's actual ecological footprint, because the same sites that were monitored for attempted eradication produced the same data that the same agencies are now using to construct the same kudzu management plans on the same calendar in the same country in the same decade of 2026. The next video on this channel will explore whether the same half-century lessons from kudzu apply to other invasive species in the same country, where the same pattern of attempted eradication has produced the same kind of monitored adjustment, rather than the same kind of full regional eradication in the same country on the same calendar in 2026. Modern invasive species management in the same agencies and universities is increasingly organized around the same lesson from kudzu. Monitor the same system, accept the same partial outcomes, and let the same biological pressures do the same work that the same agencies cannot pay to do directly with the same budgets on the same calendar in the same decade. Kudzu covers or affects about 7 million acres in the same southeastern United States, and the same figure has not moved much in 30 years, despite the same half-century of attempted control, which is itself the single most important data point in the same long-running story about the same plant on the same landscape in the same country on the same calendar in 2026. The economic damage estimate of up to $100 million per year from kudzu-induced lost timber production, lost grazing productivity, and infrastructure damage is itself consistent from year to year on the same scale, which is another reminder that the same plant continues to extract the same annual cost from the same economy at the same baseline rate on the same calendar in 2026. The combined Kudzu and Kudzu bug story is one of the most counterintuitive sequences in the same half-century of attempted biological control of an invasive species. Introduce a species you cannot kill, then accidentally introduce the same species' natural enemy, then accidentally get the same parasitoids delivered to the same country by the same ecological mechanisms without any deployment at all in 2026. The Smithsonian report of one-third reduction in kudzu biomass at the same single site in the same early 2020 is real and consistent with the same observations at the same sites by the same kind of independent observers across the same region of the country on the same calendar. And the same observation is the kind of empirical surprise the same agencies tend to share internally. The same counterintuitive result of the half-century project is methodological. The systems where scientists and managers admitted defeat and simply monitored what was happening produced more reliable ecological intelligence than the systems where heroic intervention projects persisted. And the same insight is reshaping the same agency's same playbook on the same calendar in 2026. If you take one number from this video, take 7 million acres. The same kudzu-affected southeastern footprint is the same scale that the same agencies have been trying to shrink for the same half-century. And the same footprint is still roughly the same size, which is itself the same kind of empirical fact that the same agencies now hold up as evidence on the same calendar in 2026. The full kudzu intervention system, herbicides, mechanical cutting, controlled burns, goats, classical biological control search, has cost the same agencies a great deal of money over the same decades, and the same system has produced the same partial outcomes, which is the same kind of mixed bag result that the same agencies are now trying to capture in the same kind of internal review on the same calendar. The single most striking detail of the same story is that the same introduction of the same Asian parasitoid wasps happened in 2016 without any human agency at all. The same wasps arrived in the same country on the same calendar, and then attacked the same kudzu bug egg masses on the same soybean farms in the same southeastern states. In the same way, they would have attacked them in the same wasp's native range on the same calendar in the same country. So the headline lesson from this video is that attempted eradication gave way to managed adjustment on kudzu, that the same managed adjustment produced the same empirical surprise in the same Smithsonian report, and that the same parasitoid wasp introduction in 2016 is itself the most counterintuitive episode in the half-century of the same attempted management of the same invasive species in 2026. The next video on this channel will cover the same half-century pattern on saltcedar, tamarix in the same western U.S. states where the same pattern of attempted eradication produced the same kind of outcome as the same kudzu story on the same calendar in the same decade, on the same continent in the same country today in 2026. If you take one headline from this video, let it be that the same half-century of attempted eradication of kudzu ended not in victory but in adjustment, with the same agencies now monitoring the same plant populations, while the same biological pressures and the same parasitoids do part of the same work that the same herbicides could not do at the same cost on the same calendar in 2026.